I think race plays a central role in the Bible, but there are people who claim the exact opposite, such as Professor in the Hebrew Bible, Baden.
So uh, first of all, they didn't really have the concept of race. Nobody in the Bible talks about people groups in any way really other than where you're from. Not even who do you worship, because who you worship, like which God you worship, depends on where you're from.
Right.
Like there's no so it's very much sort of geographical.
So he claims that the authors of the Bible did not have the concept of race and that people groups in the Bible are exclusively defined by their geographical location. So are people groups in the Bible defined by their geographical location? Well, the most important people group in the Bible are the Israelites, and it's very obvious they are not defined by their location because they live in a variety of places throughout the Bible. First, the Israelites lived in Egypt, but they were not Egyptians. And then they went to Canaan, but they did not become Canaanites. And later they were exiled to Babylon, but in Babylon they still remained Israelites. So what made them Israelites if it wasn't their location? Well, the Bible is pretty clear about that. Israelites are defined by their common ancestry, and according to the Bible, this common ancestry could be traced all the way back to a single individual whose name was Israel, or he had two names, Israel and Jacob. And in fact, the word for Israelites in the original Hebrew in which the Bible was written literally means descendants of Israel. So this Hebrew word here can be translated as sons, descendants, or children. And that's why in more literal translations of the Bible, the Israelites are called the sons of Israel or the children of Israel. But it's obvious that the Israelites are not the direct children of Jacob, but they are distant descendants. So the only logical translation is descendants of Israel. So just from the word itself, it's clear that Israelites are defined by their ancestry. And the same applies to other people groups in the Bible. So the Judeans, for example, are called the descendants of Judah because they were all thought to be descended from an ancestor named Judah. And the Edomites are referred to as the descendants of Edom because they were supposed to be descended from an ancestor called Edom or Esau. And the Bible refers to the Assyrians as the descendants of Asher and to the Egyptians as the descendants of Mizraim. So all of these people groups are called descendants, and that means they're all defined by their descent. And a people group defined by its descent is the dictionary definition of a race, a group of persons related by common descent or heredity. The only difference with the modern idea of race is that each race in the Bible is associated with a legendary ancestor, like Israel for the Israelites and Mizraim for the Egyptians. And all of these legendary ancestors are characters in the book of Genesis. So the entire book of Genesis is about race. And Genesis describes a very detailed racial taxonomy. So the Judeans, for example, or the Jews, were a group that was supposed to have a common ancestor called Judah. But they were also part of a larger group, the Israelites, because they shared a more distant common ancestor with the other Israelite tribes. And that ancestor was Israel or Jacob. And then they were also Hebrews because they had an even more distant ancestor called Eber, which they had in common with other Hebrew groups, such as the Edomites. And they were also Semites because they had a still more distant ancestor called Shem, that the Hebrews had in common with other Semites, such as the Assyrians. And then even further back, they had a common ancestor with all other humans because they were all descended from Adam. And that includes the Egyptians, who were not Semites, but Hamites, because they were supposed to be descended from an ancestor called Ham. And the entire book of Genesis is about these racial ancestors. So in the final chapters of Genesis, the characters are the ancestors of the different Israelite tribes, like Judah. And the chapters before that are about Jacob, the ancestor of the Israelites, and Esau, the ancestor of the Edomites. And the chapters before that are about how Jacob and Esau are descended from Eber. And the chapters before that describe how Eber, Asher, and Mizraim are descended from Shem and Ham. And then the first part of Genesis is about how Shem and Ham are descended from Adam. So the entire book of Genesis is about the origin of different races.